everybody, my name is Tanya and welcome to another edition in my very long overdue tag video series, the Coffee Shop Book Tag. This tag was created by Gio from Gio Navis and I was tagged by Jane from Yes Miss Jane. For this I'm using the adapted questions that Jane created because most of the original questions, the drinks, don't mean anything to us here in Australia, so Jane changed it around and created a more Australia friendly version of the questions. So in the last tag video that I put up, the Sailor Moon book tag, I had a couple of Agatha Christie books in there, and Nicole from Nicole's Adventures at SFF made a comment saying that I should try and do tags using only Agatha Christie books, and that got me thinking, could I do it? So I had a look through the tags that I was coming up to filming and I found one that I decided I can make work. So this is going to be Jane's rejigged coffee shop book tag Agatha Christie edition. So every question I'm going to answer using Agatha Christie books, so if you're not a fan of Agatha Christie this might not be the video for you to watch, but I'll try and make it interesting. So that's enough explaining, let's get into it. So the first question is Long Black, a book that made your soul feel just as black, a book that made you cry. So first of all, I don't really cry in books. I can't really think of any books that I've really cried in, and certainly I haven't cried in an Agatha Christie book. But I made this work, and for this question I'm going to choose a book I haven't actually read yet, and that is Curtain. Now Curtain is Poirot's last case, and I think it's going to be very sad to say goodbye to the little rotund Belgian detective with the egg-shaped head and the magnificent moustaches, because there's such a huge list of books and stories that Agatha Christie wrote starring Poirot, and to say goodbye to him and to read his last case, I think that's going to be really sad. The second question is a short black, an intense book that kept you on your toes or awake, and for that I've decided to go with And Then There Were None. And Then There Were None I've spoken about a bit before. It's one of her most famous and one of my all-time favourite Agatha Christie's. But the reason I chose it for this one is there is that element of suspense in this one. Now, most of her stories are detective mysteries, so a crime has been committed and the detective comes in to investigate. With this one, however, the action's still playing out, and so, as I outlined in the last tag I did, the guests are brought to this mysterious island and then people start dying one by one, and so you don't know what's going to happen next, who's going to die next, and it definitely keeps you on your toes, or alternatively awake because you need to know the ending. The next question is Flat White, your favourite classic. And I've taken that to mean classic Agatha, so books written from her first decade of writing. She had books published from 1920 right through till the late 70s, and then there were a few short story collections that didn't come out until the 90s. So I've gone back and I've chosen a favourite one from the 1920s. Now they're all fantastic, but the one that I've gone with is The Man in the Brown Suit. This was her fourth published work and came out in 1924. This one doesn't have one of her main detectives. The only recurring character in this one is Colonel Race, who does pop up in several other books along the way. And in her earlier days, Agatha wrote quite a few more adventure-y kind of novels. And because Poirot is not that character, and because Miss Marple is not that character, it's not one of her regular detectives. This one's largely set in Africa and it's a lot of fun. There's, roaring around and intrigue and mystery, and it's fast-paced and it's wonderful. Possibly where she's best is her intricately plotted detective novels, but this is a lot of fun for a change, and one of her early ones that isn't maybe quite so well known as some of her other things, and it is my classic choice. The next question is Latte, a sweet book that makes you smile, and for this I've decided to go with the endings of the Tommy and Tuppence novels. There are 5 books starring detective duo Tommy and Tuppence, and I've read the first 3 now, with NOM being completed this month, and the endings of them do all make me smile. Obviously I'm not going to tell you any of the lines that are in the end of these books and what makes them sweet, but I like the way she ends them, and I really like the dynamic between the characters of Tommy and Tuppence, and all 3 are the same. I can't say anything for the 4th and 5th ones at this stage, but all 3 of these have ended. The final lines just make me smile, they're sweet, and I think they're a perfect answer for this question. The next question is Iced Coffee, your favourite horror novel. And for this I've decided to go with a short story collection, so I've got it within this Miss Marple and Mystery collection, but I will pop up a picture of the cover here, and it's The Hound of Death. Now The Hound of Death is another kind of anomaly within Agatha Christie's works, or at least those that I've read so far. The Hound of Death is a short story collection that's kind of dealing with a lot of paranormal things, which is not something you see or think about when you hear the name Agatha Christie. The Hand of Death I've read a few times before, and it's a weird one. It's quite a strange bunch of stories. So as I said, most of them have got kind of this paranormal or occult kind of themes running through it. And I wouldn't call it full-on horror or anything, but I think it's the closest thing that Agatha has to a horror novel, because some of the stories are a little bit creepy. The next question is Iced Chocolate, your favourite comic novel, and I think there's a lot of comedy elements in a lot of Agatha Christie's works, particularly in her Poirot novels. I think he's not necessarily meant to be funny, but there's a lot of humour in Poirot, and his fastidiousness and his ego gives me great amusement to watch him and watch him interacting with other people. For that reason, I've gone with the Poirot and I've chosen 3-Act Tragedy. Now, I've chosen this for it's another ending. The final exchange in this one, the final few sentences, is just, I think, completely epitomises Poirot and his ego, and it just makes me laugh out loud. It's just the perfect exchange to illustrate just how obsessed with himself Poirot is. The next question is Mocha, a bittersweet ending to a book or series, and for this I'm just going to say the last Agatha Christie, when I reached the end of my chronological read through. I'm still not even halfway through, but when I get to the end of that and there's no new Agatha Christie crime stories to read, it's going to be bittersweet, because it's going to be so fantastic to say I've read them all, and that real sense of achievement of reading, 80 something books. But at the same time, it's going to be bittersweet because there's nothing new anymore. The next question is Cappuccino, a book with a title that's hard to pronounce. And I don't think there are any titles of Agatha Christie works that are hard to pronounce, but I've gone with a character. Now, there's a character that features in the short story collection The Mysterious Mr. Quinn, which I have within this Detectives and Young Adventurers collection, but I'll pop up a picture again of the actual cover of Mysterious Mr. Quinn. And he also pops up in 3-Act Tragedy that I mentioned before, and that is a character that I always have to concentrate really hard when I'm saying, because I get tongue-tied and can't say it properly. So it'll be interesting to see how many tries I have to try and say it here. But that is the character of Mr. Satterthwaite, and I pretty much got it there, so I'm quite pleased. I'm not going to try too many times, but Mr. Satterthwaite really mucks up my tongue. Something shocking, and I can't get it out. And the last question is New Flavour, an awesome book that you've yet to talk about on Booktube. I don't think I've talked about this on Booktube before. Apologies if I have and I've forgotten, but I don't think I've mentioned it on here. And that is another short story collection. So again, I've got it within this Detectives and Young Adventurers volume, but I'll pop up another picture here. And that is the second of the Tommy and Tuppence books, and that is Partners in Crime. Now, the reason that this one is so awesome and I'd like to talk about it is the idea behind it. This one was published in 1929, and it's a short story collection where Agatha Christie parodies different crime writers of the era. And so in this one, Tommy and Tuppence set up a detective agency, and the cases that they take, the way they go about detecting, is taking on another famous crime writer and detective and emulating their style. So it's a collection of 14 short stories, and there are some of the big literary heavyweights. So there's a story where they detect like Sherlock Holmes, but most of the stories I've not read a book by the author or the detective that Agatha Christie is emulating. And so a project in the distant future, when I finally get to the end of my chronological read through of Agatha, what I want to do is go back and reread this short story collection alongside a book from each of the authors that she's emulating, to get the full impact of it and to realise what she's doing and what traits from those detectives she's putting into play in these short stories. There is one other detective that I recognise in this collection though. The final short story in this collection, Tommy and Tuppence emulate the style of the very famous Hercule Poirot. And yes, Agatha Christie even emulates her own detective in this one and takes off Poirot's style for Tommy and Tuppence to emulate, and I think it's fantastic. And so that ends the Coffee Shop Book Tag Agatha Christie edition. So for giving me the idea to try and tackle a tag Agatha Christie style, I'm going to tag Nicole from Nicole's Adventures in SFF. Of course, you don't have to answer the questions Agatha Christie only, and of course you can decide whether you want to use Jane's Australian questions or Joe's original questions, but if you'd like to do it your tag, thank you for the inspiration to do this video. This only goes to prove that I can talk about Agatha Christie until the cows come home, because there's so much to her. Just the volume of her work is astounding. So as always, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye!